is the very interesting aspect. What I'm just trying to show here is that the person who actually produces the crop, produces the output. So for example, let's take the example of potato, which you see on the slide, right? At the retail level, we might buy potato for say about 40 rupees per kg. But what the farmer gets is only about 8 to 10 rupees per kg. Now, a lot of it is taken by this guy, right? That's what we all believe. And which is also true to a very large extent. 25 to 35 rupees is taken up by this person, the middleman. And I'm simplifying it. There will be other stakeholders also in the value chain. But for sake of simplicity, let's attribute all of that and club all of that into a middleman. Now, this guy is making about 25 to 35 rupees, whereas the person who's growing it is only making 8 to 10. Now, it's important to understand the role that this middleman is playing, right? Now, a farmer who's making only less than 2,000 rupees per month per person, his land holding is quite low. 70% are owning less than 2.5 acres of land. His ability to take risk is extremely low. His ability to invest and go for, say, logistics, transportation, take his crop to multiple mandis. He goes to one mandi, he doesn't find the price favorable, he'll take it to another mandi. That is not feasible because he doesn't have the ability to spend so much to afford logistics or to store his produce. That today the price is not good, so let me store my potato. I have a cold storage, I'll store it there, and when the price improves, I'll sell it. So what he has to do is, he needs immediate capital. He has spent a lot of money in buying the seeds, in taking care of the crop, in irrigation, in fertilizer, pesticides, in harvesting. Now, after having spent all of this money, he has a lot of people to pay also, both from the formal sector, which is like private and public banks, and money lenders, who he has taken money at extremely high interest, 18% to 36% per annum. So he has to pay them back. So he needs immediate capital. The guy who provides him immediate capital is the middleman. He will come to the doorstep of the farmer, which we call the farm gate. And from the farm gate, he'll buy the produce from the farmer and give him an advance immediately. So the money lender is playing multiple roles. And this is, again, extremely important from an AgTech perspective. There is a lot of scope to see what the middleman is doing and do it in a systematic, organized, meaningful way, which is a win-win for both the farmer as well as the middle person. And the gains can be in the form of efficiency, because the middlemen today are not working in a very synchronous manner. There is scope for someone to come into the middle, provide better market linkage for the farmer. And this 25 to 30, part of it can be shared with the farmer and maybe even with the end retail customer if you bring in efficiency in this pie. And there is a big pie to play with, right? Now, if we talk about yields on an average in India, our yields are slightly lower than the global average. On an average across crops, the yield is about 4 tons per hectare in the world. Ours is about 25% lower than that, about 3.25 tons per hectare. China, very importantly, is 6 tons per hectare. And now, if you look at the average land holding in China, it is only 0.6 hectares. India has more average land holding. We are at 1. China is at 0.6. Despite being at 0.6, their yields are much, much higher. And a clear question that arises is how they are doing it, right? The kind of inputs that they use, the kind of seeds that they use are much better than us. The kind of pesticide, fertilizer, and the amounts that they use are much higher than us, much more than the global average, which is why they're able to do this, because they have an equally large, if not larger population than ours to serve in terms of their food needs. And no country wants to be dependent on other countries to serve a basic need as food. Otherwise, countries can take advantage of that situation, right? And you lose your bargaining power in the world, where anyone will tell you that, okay, if you do not behave, I will cut off your food supply. So every country wants to be self-sufficient. We'll step into the part on food wastage a little more. And just to quantify it, we lose close to about 92,600 crore in terms of just post-harvest losses across commodities, right? And like I was saying, in fruits and vegetables, it's 5 to 16%, oilseeds 3 to 9%, pulses 6 to 8%, cereals 5 to 6%. Spoken about losses. Now I'll come to another aspect. Someone touched upon this in terms of mechanization, right? What sort of a mechanization do we have? What sort of an automation do we have? And again, I felt that it's important to look at India in the context of various other countries. And when we talk about mechanization, and we'll take two examples on mechanization. One, compare India with something which is sort of incomparable to India, right? Which is the other extreme of well-developed mechanization. And we'll compare India to another example, which is closer to India. So I'll start comparing India with US, which is an incomparable example because they're in the extreme of good level of mechanization, 90%, whereas in India, the mechanization level is 40%. And by mechanization, I mean usage of both tractors as well as farm equipment for performing agriculture activities. And China, which is at about 50% mechanization, right? So if you look at the, if you look at US, the contribution that agriculture has in USA's GDP is only 1%, right? The number of people employed in agriculture in their workforce is only 2.5%. You contrast that with India. India is about 14 to 16% contribution to GDP, and 50% of our population is engaged in agriculture. Their mechanization is 95%. We are at only about 40%. Their average land holding, and this is critical, is about 179 hectares. Ours is only 1.08 hectares. So for them, it is extremely critical to mechanize. Otherwise, they can't do it manually. And because the manual labor, the wage rate is $120 per day. Our wage rate is only about $5 per day, right? So for us, it is easier to use manpower. For them, it is prohibitive to use manpower, right? The size of their mechanization industry is $40 billion. Ours is about $10 billion, right? Now let's look at China. Here, the average land holding is about only 0.6 hectares, but the level of mechanization is 50%. Their market size is 3 times ours, around 28 billion. And the average wage rate is about $17 per day. So clearly, level of mechanization is low. And that's also because of the wage rate being extremely low in India. It makes sense for people to actually go for human labor. Another critical aspect is the financing of this entire thing, right? And that becomes extremely critical because for a person not earning too much, he has to depend on finance to take care of his particular needs, right? And there is both lack of access to credit as well as risk management practices. Now, what I'm showing here on the chart on the left, top left, is the non-institutional credit as well as institutional credit. And let's define what non-institutional and institutional is. Institutional credit is from the banks like HDFC, Access, ICICI banks. These are private banks. State public sector units, that is State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, Punjab National Bank. These would be as well as regional rural banks, right? They will all come under the ambit of institutional credit. Non-institutional credit will be from informal sources, like a guy in the village who gives money to people, right? He could give them 100 rupees in the morning. Like, for example, if you talk about, say, a hawker who is taking a cart of fruits to sell, what he'll do is, just let's take an example. He's taking 100 rupees in the morning as loan, goes to the market, buys 100 rupees worth of goods, sells it for, say, 105 rupees. And the guy who's given him 100 rupees loan, he tells him that in the evening, you have to give me 101 rupees, right? He does that every day, 365 days. How much is the interest rate he's paying? 365%. Because he's basically taking that same 100 rupees every day and paying 1 rupee on that 100 rupee every night. So on that 100 rupees, he's actually paying 365 rupees. So he's paying 365% interest. It sounds so simple and it sounds unexploitative, right? You're giving him 100, taking 101, only taking 1 rupee a day. But it's actually 365%. Would you or any of us on this call, would we ever take a loan at 365% interest rate? Not at all, right? But that is the reality. That is what the farmer is up against when he's facing non-institutional sources.